Next up, and this I think is going to be particularly interesting, is Ari Armstrong, who is in fact I don't know if you'd call yourself a Tea Partier, but I would definitely call you a citizen journalist. He has spent a lot of time documenting what Tea Partiers actually think. And I first met Ari, I believe the first time I met you, I was giving a speech to a Tea Party rally in a brewery, and this was the most exciting thing that I've ever done before. I had a beer in one hand, I was railing about the Constitution with the other hand, and the owner of the brewery was a Tea Partier, and Ari interviewed me afterwards, and we got to know each other, and I think it's interesting. He runs Free Colorado, and Ari Armstrong.
All right, thanks a lot. I think maybe the question is, can we help the Tea Party Sisyphus afford a bulldozer or some comparable tool? So I'm going to basically argue that they're both right. We face enormous institutional challenges, and this is a huge problem. There's still concentrated benefits. But at the same time, there are enormous opportunities. So what's going to make the difference? My position is that the difference is going to be the ideas that the Tea Partiers embrace, and that the people at this conference and like-minded people help them discover and develop. So I'm sure everyone has read, or most people have read, this 1949 essay from Hayek, The Intellectuals and Socialism. But I think it's such a classic that it's worth bringing up. And it's one of these essays that reads like it could have been written last week. So I'm going to spend a few minutes to review this before I get into the Tea Party specifically. And this is, I think, a side to Hayek that is sometimes neglected. It's not just spontaneous order. It's like, hey, we need to also do some ordering at the small Tea Party-ish level, at the activist level. So Hayek reminds us that while intellectuals cannot enact their peculiar opinions of the moment, over somewhat longer periods they have enormous influence. Of course, his big example here, writing in the late 40s, was that of socialism. And he notes that in every country that has moved towards socialism, the phase of the development in which socialism becomes a deterring influence on politics has been preceded for many years by a period during which socialist ideals govern the thinking of the more active intellectuals. Maybe you've read Emily Schlei's book, where she discusses American intellectuals, many of whom went on to work for FDR, going to kiss the ring of Joseph Stalin. So what is an intellectual? I'll give you some highlights from Hayek's essay. And he's not 100% enthusiastic about intellectuals. So the typical intellectual need be neither the original thinker nor the scholar or expert in a particular field of thought. Nor need he even be particularly intelligent to perform his role as intermediary in the spreading of ideas. What qualifies him for his job is the wide range of subjects on which he can readily talk and write, and he becomes acquainted with new ideas sooner than his audience. So what is the scope? Here's a picture of Judge Napolitano on Fox News talking about our friends Mises and Hayek. The class does not consist only of journalists, teachers, ministers, lecturers, publicists, radio commentators, writers of fiction, cartoonists, and artists. It also, he continues, includes professionals. For instance, I know a doctor in Colorado, in addition to being a full-time radiologist, he writes daily about health policy issues and has written some really nice papers on health policy. Intellectuals filter ideas. It doesn't matter how great your research is, how great your studies are, if nobody reads them. So Hayek is somewhat pessimistic about the ability of the right people to get their ideas out. He notes that outside our special fields of work, we are dependent for our information and instruction on those who make it their job to keep abreast of opinion, the intellectuals. Intellectuals largely determine which work of the expert and the original thinker gets promoted. And he gives a couple of examples here of economists who promote socialism or protectionism. This is not real economics, right? And yet it's more popularly understood as economics because of the intellectuals. So he says that intellectuals can popularize views of the minority, even when that minority is mostly of rather doubtful standing in their profession. Hayek had a great way of mocking people he didn't like. And for Hayek, the economist grants that philosophy is the king in the intellectual class. He writes of it as a prince among the intellectuals, the philosopher. Although his influence is farther removed from practical affairs, his striving after a consistent worldview gives him probably a greater influence over the intellectuals than any other scholar or scientist. Just a nice concession from the economist. I'm struck by how comparable Ayn Rand's views are on the spread of ideas with Hayek's. So I'm going to read this, it's a little longer, but I think it really encapsulates what Rand and Hayek are getting at in terms of how ideas spread through the culture. The professional intellectual is a field agent of the army, whose commander-in-chief is the philosopher. He sets a society's course by transmitting ideas from the ivory tower to the philosopher, to the university professor, to the writer, to the artist, to the newspaperman, to the politician, to the movie maker, to the nightclub singer, to the man in the street. The intellectual is the eyes, ears, and voice of a free society. That is, if it's doing its job correctly. So what's the problem? Where's the breakdown? Maybe this image is a cheap shot here. In classical liberals, where do things go wrong? Hayek has a couple of reasons, but this is a stronger reason that he gives in his essay. He writes, once the basic demands of the liberal programs seem satisfied, the liberal thinkers turn to the problems of detail and tended to neglect the development of the general philosophy of liberalism, which in consequence ceased to be a live issue offering scope for general speculation. So what do we need to do? We must make the building of a free society once more an intellectual adventure, a deed of courage. So what are some examples then? He did not pick an expert, but the same. We have Matt Kibbe, educated at George Mason University, the great free market institution of our day, who is now a community organizer. This is a couple of years ago when he's speaking in Washington, D.C. in front of a Tea Party crowd. And of course the photo only gives you a small slice of the total crowd that was present on that day. So he really was able to get the message out that day. And then with all of the residual media, of course, much broader spread. We've all seen the John Popola, Russ Roberts videos. And I think this really nicely illustrates bringing these really abstract economic ideas, boiling them down, essentializing them into a presentation. If you read the transcript, it's really quite remarkably condensed and good economics. And yet it's in a few minutes that the average person can understand and grasp. And so we've all seen it, but the important thing is millions of regular people outside of the academy have also seen it. That and the follow-up. Here's another example from my home state. A guy named Paul Premise. I don't always agree with Paul, but I think it's a good example of somebody who takes the spreading of ideas very seriously at a personal level. He earns his living by consulting his economist, but he's also a part-time professor at one of the state universities. He came up with a class for the layperson that he calls Free People, Free Markets, the Foundations of Liberty. And he's really active in this group called Pikes Peak Economics Club in the Colorado Springs area. They say our mission is educational, to promote economic and civic literacy. It is our contention that you cannot have a controlled economy and maintain a free society. So here you have, again, professionally trained economist intentionally bringing his views to the Tea Party type activists. I thought I'd just tell you a few anecdotes from my own personal experience, which I think are a good indication of how things go down in a lot of places. In my state, I run personally in Denver a group called Liberty in the Books. You can look it up, libertyinthebooks.com. And we get together every month and we discuss great works of economics by Bastiat, by Hazlitt, and so on. We also read some law and some history too. We've read Emily Schle's book. And this has been a great opportunity for bringing the ivory tower's ideas down to Tea Party level activists. There's also Liberty Toastmasters, which obviously is an offshoot of Toastmasters, but we have two groups now in the Denver area where people get together explicitly on Saturday morning of all the times to talk about the ideals of liberty. And it's a great way of networking. Also, is there Liberty in the Rocks in your state? This started in Denver by a lady named Amanda Mill. It used to be Tracy, she got married. And this is spread out across the nation. I don't know how many chapters there are now. But what's remarkable to me, I was sort of skeptical of the idea when I first heard of Amanda talking about it. But it's really a remarkable networking opportunity. And it's not just people getting together to drink beer, though there's plenty of that, but it's actually talking about the real ideas that matter. It's bringing in, we had Paul Jacob there a few weeks ago in Denver. And so we're getting academics coming in, speaking about these important ideas to regular on-the-street activists. Then of course there's the Tea Party organizations. I don't personally attend these because I just don't have the time, but I know I have friends who regularly go to monthly meetings, regular meetings, where again there's an opportunity to share these ideas. Even political parties, I'm not registered because I can't stand it, but I do have friends who can tolerate the Republican establishment and going through the caucus system, and again, especially the lower level caucus system, it's a great place to stand up and give a speech about the latest ideas. We also have some IOA discussion groups and events in the Denver area that's really robust. And of course we have the Independence Institute, not to be confused with the Independent Institute. And also we have the newer group called Centennial, and it's more of a religious right group. But these are the two big think tanks. And of course they have large-scale events where they're bringing in outside scholars or in-state scholars to give presentations to regular sorts of people, and activists. Incidentally, the photo is of a Liberty on the Rocks event, and the guy in the middle actually started the two Liberty Toastmasters groups. So I took a very informal survey a few weeks ago. Again, nothing scientific about it, but I think it gives an indication of of what at least a lot of Tea Partiers are thinking. And it was remarkable that a lot of people who responded, and again, it was a difficult survey, so it's the more intellectual Tea Partiers who were responding, but there was a wide familiarity with Ayn Rand, Hayek, Mises, Milton Friedman, and Thomas Sowell. And not surprisingly, there's more familiarity with Rand than with The Economist, because she's a novelist and a philosopher. But there's also a wide range of mentions, including, not limited to, Amity Shlaes, Walter Williams, Murray Rothbard, Ron Paul, Richard Dawkins, somebody threw that in, Rose Wilder Lane, Michelle Malkin, and so on. And people mentioned a variety of organizations where they get their information, including Freedom Works, Cato, Ayn Rand Institute, NRA, GOP, etc. And then they mentioned a variety. I just had them describe where they go to normally to get their sources of news and views. So, a lot of people at this conference are academics. They work in the academy. A lot of people are think tank type people and more used to getting the ideas to the masses. But I think some of these points are worth reviewing. How do you get your ideas, especially if you're in the academy, through or around the filter of the intellectuals? And some of these points are obvious. I'm just going to focus on the first two. One obvious thing that people don't do is communicate with journalists. If you see the article about some economic issue that is not very fleshed out or doesn't include a range of opinions, it's perfectly legitimate to get a hold of the journalist and say, hey, nice article, I think you might have added this other point. By the way, I personally know some people who are able to give intelligent commentary on this for future articles. And the next item I want to highlight, which is, especially if you work at a university, you can help sponsor campus clubs. It's impossible to underestimate how important these are, because campus clubs can get money that students pay to their student government in order to bring in outside speakers, which the public is invited to. That's the big difference between campus clubs and just regular classes. So John Thrasher, who's sitting in the room, he ran a very robust group at the University of Colorado for several years while he was a student there. And he brought in a number of great free market types of speakers, lectures, where there was large public turnout. Unfortunately, when John left to abandon us to go to Arizona, there was no faculty in place to keep the continuity of the group alive. So it's now died out entirely. Right now, there's not a single active campus group in the state of Colorado that's doing these things like organizing these public lectures. And that, to me, is a real tragedy. And I just don't have the time personally to do it. So that's one thing that professors can do, is keep these things alive and keep continuity in them, so that we can get the ideas out there to the masses through this institution. And I think the other points are more obvious, but maybe the obvious things maybe people don't do as much as they might. I had the good fortune of rifling through some letters from and by Mises and a variety of his students, because I happen to know the son of this guy, John Van Sickle, who retired in Boulder. And I pull out this letter he's writing about Mises on Mises' 80th birthday. So I just thought this was a great illustration of a model scholar and intellectual. And Van Sickle writes, I duly bought the book, Socialism is Psycho, climbed into bed where I do my best reading, read till sunup, and found myself transformed in a single night into a confirmed liberal with a deep debt of gratitude to and lasting affection for a great scholar, a magnificent teacher, an inspiring fighter in an endless struggle for freedom, and a very lovely person. And I think Hayek also has some comparable conversion experience with the book Socialism, right? So these are the works that matter. So what is your place in history? Here's another letter by Professor Van Sickle to his dear friend Fritz. I guess you'd call him Fritz if you were from. Dear Fritz, I need not tell you how delighted I was to learn of the Nobel Prize award. I hope I am wrong, but I think it would have been awarded much earlier had you not written the road to serfdom. So I think the lesson there is maybe for some people in this conference, there might be a trade-off between professional accolades and actually getting your message out to the people who can implement these ideas as a matter of policy and cultural change. I'll just leave that up as a thought. So join the battle, Hayek again. If we can regain the belief in the power of ideas, which was the mark of liberalism at its best, the battle is not lost. The intellectual revival of liberalism is already underway in many parts of the world. Will it be in time? And again, I thought this essay read like it could have been written last week. So what I'd like to do, I collected about 3 minutes of interviews from some Tea Party type people. I think these are all from Colorado, but I think that it's a good indication of the sorts of things on the Tea Partiers' mind. So, with your indulgence, I will play this.
We try to inform people about individual rights, free markets, and limited government, and that's what brings us all together.
Less government, less spending.
This is my spending cap right here. I think that's the first step. Less taxes, less spending, a little bit more common sense. We have to be able to have discussions about the most important things in our nation without being vilified on one side.
Reduction in government, restriction of government, limited taxes.
It's bringing out people who really have a strong political philosophy that are coming out and really talking about the fundamentals of liberty and freedom.
It's coming back to the core values of America. Really why this country was founded was on principles of liberty and independence and of limited government.
Liberty is the principle that everybody should live free of coercion.
We don't need the federal government in there to tell us how to run our lives.
It's people wanting to have more freedom, less government, less taxes, less regulation.
Freedom, liberty, and support of the Constitution.
I wanted to stand up for my rights as an American, as a black female American. I feel that our sovereignty is being taken away from us. I feel that my grandson here, he's not even 2, he's already in debt.
The KIV stands for free market, liberty, and less spending.
Stop spending. Cut. And cut the things that I use too.
I'm no economist, but I'm very, very concerned about them having spent us right to the edge of the abyss.
I want the government out of my life. They're too intrusive now. The Congress needs to stop the wild spending, the deficit spending.
I believe that the government is heading on a very dangerous path. If it's not reversed, we're going to lose many of our freedoms.
I am just concerned about the direction our government is taking as far as trying to control and overtaxing us.
I'm tired of the spending.
Tired of the spending, that's the whole thing.
Knock it off. It's just ridiculous. It's absolutely
Spending
insanity.
like drunken sailors.
Fed up with big government. Fed up with spending. Fed up with the horrible health insurance plan that's in the making.
The federal government and the local government spending more money than they have potential income, and it's going to cause inflation like you can't believe.
The government at this point is acting like it's a given fact that our rights no longer exist and that they can grant them back to us.
We're just very, very concerned about the spending that the government's doing. We're concerned that the programs that they're putting in place are going to take away our choices and our freedoms and our liberties.
We're worried about our children's future. We feel like we're bankrupting them.
Came out here to celebrate the founding principles that make our republic possible, namely, reliance on individual, economic, and political liberty.
We have to make a stand and say, what is America for?
So thanks. So my point, I guess, is this. Ideas matter. And these people are hungry for your ideas. And to the extent that there are walls between free market academia and the Tea Partiers, I think it's really important to continue to break those walls.